Okay, I think I'm ready. I have the books stacked in front of me and I'm ready to tell you about my favourite books of 2024. I say this every year, but this is truly my favourite time of year. Everyone just gushing over their favourite books that we read. I will say, however, 2024 was not my best reading year, not in terms of numbers, just like the quality of the books. I also started using Storygraph consistently during this year, and in Storygraph you can do half and quarter stars. So I've been a lot stingier with my 5-star reads, as well as not having the best reading year. So I do have, as I always do, my top 15, and I have some honourable mentions. These are just the books that I read within 2024, not necessarily released this year. But yeah, some of these aren't even 5 stars because I had a pretty low amount of 5-star reads this year. But I tried to pick the books, I stress over this every year, I tried to pick the books that I felt best encapsulated my reading year, books that I thought about the most. So there were probably books that didn't make the list that I technically rated higher because objectively they were a good book, but they didn't stick with me the way that some of these books stuck with me and that I thought about them, if that makes any sense. But I think I'm ready. I even put on nails for this. I got ready. I'm kind of nervous because I've been stressing over this list for no reason, just because I'm me. But let's start with my honourable mentions. The first 2 honourable mentions I have were not even 5 stars. I think I gave them just below 4. But I'm about to start rereading one because I do keep thinking about these books. And the fact that they are like a fantasy is probably why I didn't rate them as highly the first time. But I think I said even when I read them that I'll probably reread them and like them more the second time around, which I think is true. So I'm going to mention them anyway. They couldn't be in my best books list just because they weren't even 5 stars. But I have 2 fantasy books. First of all, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I do keep just thinking about the vibes of this book. I think I did the same with Legends and Lattes, but I liked that one more. And I'm about to start rereading this just because I feel like I want to be back in the world. Like I enjoyed being in the world, but I cannot consider this a favorite just because maybe I can after I reread it, but I just thought I'd mention it in the honourable mentions section. I'm going to go through these faster. Also, That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. This also, like, I just had so much fun when I was reading it, so I feel like I have to mention it, even though it's not in my favourites. This was just a really fun time, and I'm going to continue in probably both those series. A couple of romance that didn't make my list. I have a very small amount of romance books making my top list for the amount of romance that I read this year. But The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston was one of the first romance books that I actually enjoyed during the year. I do think as the year went on, other books beat this out of my top list, but I thought this was really fun if you're looking for a romance with like a magical twist. And then one that I read recently, Lavash at First Sight. I'll have to insert the cover because I don't own it physically. This one is a sapphic romance that I really enjoyed. And then lastly, for my honourable mentions, a non-fiction that didn't make my top list. I didn't read that many, but if I read more, they probably would have all made the list. But this one is Love and Autism, which is just a book following 5, I think it was, different autistic people and just interviewing them throughout their life. And then the author like compiled it all together. So those are 5 honourable mentions that I didn't put in my top list, so I won't go into detail of those. But let's get into the actual books that are in my top 15 of the year. Okay, the first one, which is a short story, which I have had a short story on my list before. But this one, I just ordered myself a copy that turned up in the mail yesterday because I listened to it via audio, but I'm going to reread this probably a lot of times. It is Recitative by Toni Morrison. This one is a very short one. It's a short story, and half of this is the introduction that's written by Zadie Smith. I just thought this was so interesting, and based on the premise, I think it's pretty obvious that I would have enjoyed this. Like I said, I listened to it on audio, and I'm going to go back and reread because I just need to annotate and write in it and probably read this over multiple times. This is, like I said, a short story, and it is about these 2 women who meet when they are children in, what did they call it? A girls' shelter. Okay, so these 2 girls that meet in a girls' shelter, they are roommates, and then it just shows them meeting again throughout different times of their lives. And the interesting thing about this one is one of the girls is white and one of the girls is black, but the author does not tell you which is which. And I just think that is like so interesting. And yeah, I really, when it ended, I just wanted to read more. Obviously there wasn't very much because it is a short story, but I just wanted more so badly. Next up, for number 14, I have a sci-fi that I read towards the end of the year. I had been recommended this by a few friends and I did enjoy it. This one is Annie Bot by Sierra Greer. I don't usually like sci-fi, but I think this is the style that I can read from a sci-fi. This is basically following the main character, who is a robot, who is created to be the perfect girlfriend for her owner. And it was just really interesting. I feel like this is not going to work for everyone, especially the ending. I feel like there's probably a lot of people who are going to be wanting more. But for me personally, I thought it was perfect. I feel like the book can be kind of seen, or I thought it could be kind of seen as an analogy for, being in an abusive relationship and how that can look. Annie is being told by the people who work on her that she's just so lucky that she has Doug as her owner and he's just such a good owner, when beneath the surface, he's not really that great of a person. And I feel like, there was just a lot that I, as a human woman, can relate to in this robot woman. And I just feel like the pure rage that comes from within when you are freed from a situation, or when you are able to finally see the situation, and the rage that you feel about what you've had to suffer through. I mean, I related to a robot apparently. Next up, I have a cozy mystery. I'm actually disappointed that I didn't find more cozy mysteries that I liked in 2024, because my top book of 2023 was a cozy mystery. But this was my favorite of the ones that I did read. This one is Every Time I Go on Vacation, Someone Dies by Catherine Mack. This one is following our main character, who is an author, and she had an experience with an ex-boyfriend years ago, and to deal with that experience, she wrote it all down, and what she wrote ended up being published as a book. So she became an accidental best-selling author because she didn't change her ex-boyfriend's name in the book. He is blackmailing her for part of the royalties, and now she is on a vacation with him and a bunch of other authors, and it's a cozy mystery, obviously. So there's a mystery, there's deaths. The ex-boyfriend is now saying that someone in real life wants to kill him. And I just thought this was really silly, goofy, and fun. And the author breaks the fourth wall and is talking to the reader. There's footnotes where the author is talking to you. I just thought this was a lot of fun. I need to pick up more books probably in this style, because I've been trying to read more lighter things throughout the year. And this is definitely a fun way to do that. So that is my next on the list. Switching gears entirely from cozy to very not cozy, I have Minor Detail by Adania Shibley. I did think that's what they said on the audiobook. Now I can't remember how to pronounce the name. Oh, that's right. Let it be known also that the yellow cover that we got in Australia is not my favorite. I like the US one a lot more, but this is what my library has, so this is what I'm holding up. It's just very yellow. This one is heartbreaking. It's split up into two parts. It's pretty short, but it's split up into two parts. The first part is set in 1948, and we are reading about just a terrible thing that had happened to a young Palestinian girl. Then the second half is in present day, and we are following a woman who reads about this awful thing and becomes obsessed with this minor detail, or the way that they wrote about this horrific experience of this person years ago, as a minor detail within a larger context. And our main character becomes obsessed with finding out more about it. And obviously horrible things have been happening in Palestine for many years, and I feel like this was heartbreaking, but it was really well written and it is a favorite. Next up, for a fantasy series that I have enjoyed, or am enjoying because I'm not done, but it is the Wayward Children series by Shauna Maguire. I'm going to put all of them down and just hold up the first one. My library didn't have all of them, and I'm not even through all of the ones that my library did have, but I'm excited to get caught up on this series. And I do think I had been recommended this series before by people, and you were totally right. I'm obviously holding up the first book, but this series is just about these children who have gone into these doorways into different magical worlds. I don't know if I explained that very good. And this first book is set in this home for the wayward children, ones that are waiting for their doors to reappear to go back into different worlds. And then I've read the next couple. They're all very short, and they're all following different characters And I just thought they were really, really fun. I really like this author. I've liked a previous book by this author that was a longer one, but I thought these were really fun. They're quick to get through. I'm able to like follow along and not get too lost. I do think they're young adults, and perhaps that is why I'm able to follow along a bit more than I normally am. But yeah, I would recommend these if you're intimidated by fantasy like I am, because they're quite short and they're really quite fun. Okay, I think we're in my top 10 now, are we? This one is a romance book. This author has made my list, I think, the last 3 years. This one is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I will pick up everything that this author writes. This is the third in like the little interconnected series. All of her books kind of link up, but the first one was Part of Your World, then it was Yours Truly, and then this one was released this year, Just for the Summer. I feel like I like this author because she writes romances, but I do feel like they have that lit fic feel for me, because they always deal with some deeper topics. They're not super light and fluffy. The characters feel really, really fleshed out. This one, we are following our male main character who believes that he has a curse, that every time he dates someone, when they break up, that person goes on to find the love of their life. So he writes this Reddit post about his curse, and our female main character, Emma, comes across the Reddit post and she thinks she also has the same curse, where everyone she's broken up with has found the love of their life. So she contacts him and is like, hey, I also have this curse. Perhaps if we date, when we break up, we'll both find the loves of our lives, which is a really fun premise in my opinion. And like I said, these are all connected to each other. And because Part of Your World was one of my favorite books the year that I read it, there is a connection in this one that literally had my jaw dropped to the floor. Maybe other people could have picked it, but I certainly didn't. And like I said, I just like this author. So there we have number 10. I feel like it was overexposed. I always have a camera issue. This is like the most important video that I'm filming, and I always have a camera issue. Okay. Number 9, we have a horror book. This one, I don't know if I can say this one is the reason all the books are falling down, because I had this one facing out because I love the cover so much. And I'm glad that I also love the insides. This is Chlorine by Jade Song. This is a fairly short horror book. We are basically following our main character, who is a competitive swimmer, and she wants to become a mermaid. I feel like that's like all I can say. This one is just really, really weird. We have an Asian main character though, which you know I love. But yeah, I'm not going to say too much about this one. It's just a weird horror book where, yeah, the main character wants to be a mermaid. That's all I can say for that one. But I personally enjoyed it. Okay, number 8 is a super backlist book, but I did see other people picking it up this year, and so I picked it up and I, of course, loved it. This one is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. This was literally published 30 years ago, 1994, the year I was born. And this one is set on this island where things are mysteriously disappearing and people are forgetting them. It's kind of hard to explain, and it sounds silly when I explain it, but like they will wake up one morning and like hats have disappeared from their memory. Like they can hardly remember what a hat is, and they can feel that hat is the next thing to disappear. So then they have to go and burn or throw away or just get rid of every single hat. And as time goes on, they completely forget the concept of a hat. And there are a few people who, for some reason, they are not forgetting the things that everyone else is forgetting, and they are able to keep their memories. And there are these memory police who are trying to track these people down. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. I thought it was great. It is exactly my taste. I think some people probably would hate the ending. I personally liked it. So if you have similar taste to me, you may enjoy this one, but that is my number 8 on the list. Number 7, we have a non-fiction book. This is a collection of essays. This one is Safe Space by Alyssa Huyn. This one, as I said on the top, is Essays on the Asian Australian Experience, Fighting Racism and Finding Hope for a Brighter Future. And this one, as it says, it's a collection of essays. I would recommend not reading them all in one go like I did. I think this is probably better if you read like one essay a week, because it's kind of a lot. But I think that everyone, especially if you live in Australia, should read this one. The author is an Asian woman who has grown up in Australia. And for those who maybe, I don't know, I guess I assume racism is like similar everywhere, but in Australia specifically, the way that the racism is, it is like very deep rooted into us, and it comes across as like, yeah, it's almost like disguised into the humor and the culture. I don't know how to explain it, but if you're Australian, you will know. Even the first bit here says, I've played the role of the quiet and embarrassed Asian girl who shyly laughs along more than I should have in my lifetime. Enough is enough. And I am trying to unpack all of the internalized racism that I have had growing up as an Asian person growing up in Australia. I don't have the exact same experience as I'm mixed as this author, but I definitely could relate to a lot of what she was saying. I tabbed it a lot, I highlighted a lot. Like I was highlighting whole pages because there was not only things that I could relate to, but there was also like good information. Like she just wrote things in such an intelligent way that I wouldn't have been able to put my thoughts into writing that way. And I feel like it was really thought-provoking because I am reflecting on my experience growing up in this country. And like I said, putting in the work to try and unpack the internalized racism that I just took on growing up in a country that is extremely racist. And I feel like even if you're not Asian, you should read this because I think there's a lot that you could learn, even if you think you're already a great ally to people of color. Sometimes online, I'm noticing people think they're allies, but I don't know if they know that things they're doing, comments they're making are not helpful. So I was really happy to get my hands on this one. The publisher, Simon & Schuster, actually sent this to me. I think it was my first physical ARC that I got in the mail, and it came on my birthday, so it is perfect. And I'm so glad I loved it, which I knew I would, based on the quotes that I was seeing this author post on social media. So yeah, highly recommend if you're looking for something like this. Next up, another nonfiction that I read earlier in the year. This one is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This one is like a memoir, but it's written in kind of vignettes, and it details the author's experience of being in an abusive relationship with another woman. And I just thought this was really, really well done. There is one part in particular that I just have not stopped thinking about, and I read this at the very beginning of the year. Like I said, it's written in a really interesting way, like short little vignettes. And there's this one section where the author writes it as a like choose your own adventure book. You know, those ones where it was like, if you choose this, go to page whatever. And just the way she wrote it, I don't know if I'm going to explain this correctly, but the way she wrote it, you just keep circling back around. So it was like, if you apologize, go to page 194. And if you do whatever, go to page 195. And the way that she wrote it, it just kept cycling back around in a circle, which is like such an interesting way of representing the cycle of abuse in relationships. Because if you're not familiar, that is exactly how it works. You just end up back in a circle. I just thought that was such an interesting way to write that. And that particular part of the book has stuck with me the entire year. I mean, the whole book has, but I just kept thinking about the way she wrote that was really, really creative. And obviously, the writing for the entire book is excellent. I loved it. And another one that I would recommend if you are in the headspace to read it. Okay, moving on to my top 5. This one is taking more of a lighter tone. Really unexpected for me. This one is Woke Up Like This by Amy Lee. This one is like a little romance with a kind of time loop, time jumping aspect. This one, if you like the movie 13 Going on 30, I would recommend this book because it is a very similar premise. In this one, we are following our main character named Charlotte Wu. She's 17. She is setting up for prom with her, I don't know, rival, I guess, high school rival, another boy who she doesn't get along with. They're setting up for prom and she is climbing up a ladder. She falls and lands on him. Then they both wake up and they realize that they are in bed together and they're 30 years old. So somehow they have jumped through time and now they're like, 1, how did we get here? And 2, why in the future are we married to each other when they don't like each other in high school? So yeah, now they're in their 30-year-old bodies in the future and they're trying to figure out how to get back to prom. And this was just really unexpected for me because technically this one is a young adult book, which I don't read anymore. But I feel like this is one that adults can enjoy. My doorbell. Okay, I got interrupted, so I don't know where I was up to, but I think I was talking about this one. This was really unexpected for me based on the fact that I'm pretty sure this is technically young adult. But we are following the 17-year-olds when they wake up in their 30-year-old life. So I feel like it could be enjoyed by young adults and adult readers. Number 4, we have another romance. This one is a sapphic romance. This one is Late Bloomer by Maisie Eddings. And this one is 2 autistic women falling in love. So we have Opal, who ends up winning the lottery. I think they called it in the book a scratch off, but in Australia we call them scratchies. So she wins like $500,000 on a scratchy, and she ends up buying, in a very sketchy way, a flower farm. So she moves to the flower farm, and when she gets there, our other main character named Pepper is there and is very grumpy and is saying, I don't know how you think you've bought this farm because I live on this farm and work on this farm. So it definitely has that grumpy sunshine dynamic. They end up obviously falling in love. It's a romance, but they end up having to cohabit the place on the farm together. And yeah, I thought this one personally was really sweet and cute. My top 3 books I'm definitely feeling the most confident about being my favorites. Number 3 is another horror book. I read this at the beginning of the year and I thought it was so good. This is Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huang. And this one is about our main character who gets a job at this, what do they call it? A high-end beauty and wellness shop. And so it really comments on like the beauty industry and things. This beauty shop that she is working at is very popular, and it's a horror book, so obviously some things happen. I just thought this was so good, and there was a reveal that happened partway into the book that made it be solidified as one of my favorites. And yeah, I would really recommend this to my weird horror reader friends. If you like that literary horror with the weirdness, I would recommend this one to you. My number 2 spot is a lit fic book that I read again at the beginning of the year. A lot of my favorite books I read at the start of the year, and they have just stuck with me the whole time. But this one is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. In this one, we are following these 2 siblings who receive the inheritance of their mother, and the inheritance is this black cake that they are to eat and share together. And the book is, following them, finding out more about their family, trying to reconnect with each other. And this is definitely my type of book. I really, really enjoyed it. I think this did get adapted, which I haven't watched. I don't watch movies or TV shows. I don't even know what it got adapted into. But yeah, really love books that follow a family through life or through generations. And this was exactly that. Lastly, we have my number 1 top book of the year. This one is, again, a lit fic with kind of mystery aspect or a mystery feel to it. But this one is The Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff. This one is set in India, and we are following these women in the village. Our main character is named Geeta, and she is believed by everyone in the village that she has killed her husband because he went missing several years ago. She's never corrected anyone because it kind of worked for her to have everyone think that. But then women start coming to her saying, hey, can you help me kill my husband now? Because the men in this village do not treat the women very well at all. And so now, because she's gone along with it, having people think that she killed her husband. So now she's going to have to go along with this and try and figure out ways to get rid of the horrible men in their village. I know the way I described it, it feels like it's going to be a funny, cozy mystery. And I wouldn't describe it as a cozy mystery exactly, but I definitely think it tackled the dark themes within this one in like a funny, humorous way. Like it's definitely dark humor. This isn't like a cozy, funny mystery, which is why I would usually describe it as more lit fic just because of the themes it's dealing with, but I'm not entirely sure. It definitely had dark humor in it, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I feel like I never see people talking about this, and so I would recommend it to everyone who reads this genre or is interested in this premise, because I love women standing up for themselves and getting revenge on those that harm them. So that, I think, is the 15 favorite books, or my 15 favorite books of 2024, plus some honourable mentions. I'm hoping that 2025, I have even more favorites. Like I said, 2024 was not the most successful year for me reading wise. So yeah, not all of this list even was 5-star reads for me, but regardless, I enjoyed them all and I feel like they impacted me in some which way or another. And I feel like the list overall represents my current reading taste of the year, I think. I don't know. I'm just looking at it and trying not to like second guess my list. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you've read any of these and if you enjoyed them, or let me know if I have convinced you to read any of these based on this video. And if you're watching to the end, I'm going to let you in on a little secret that this shirt that I'm wearing is actually a pajama top. So I wore pajamas for this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video.